Well, I think people have missed us a little bit because people have been asking me and they've been asking you, have we quit the podcast?
No, we haven't, but we've been a little busy.
We have been busy, and it's exciting that we've been busy. I did a little sort of intro a couple of weeks ago. We're working on this sexuality practitioner program, but we don't want to lose the podcast either.
Absolutely not.
So, and I'm kind of tickled that people are saying things and just complimenting how we seem to be a pretty good match. You had the good idea of talking about autism and offending issues.
Yeah, I mean, the statistics are just amazing. And I know that you have them down pat, but it's something like people with autism are 7 times more likely to be in jail. It could be even higher than that.
It depends on what you read, but no matter
Yeah.
how you read it or what you read, the statistics do not look good for people with.
No, they don't. And they're in for, I mean, certainly for pornography, child pornography, and for stalking. I do remember, and I think I've mentioned this before, that I chaired a cross systems committee once, and there were people from the Department of Corrections, and we had someone from the Bureau of Autism come and talk about autism. And as the person was speaking, the individual from the Department of Corrections just said, "Wait a minute." And he said to his colleague that was there, "Do we have these guys or what?" And he said, just once they're in there, they have difficulty following directions. And I mean, they were just like a whole group of people that just sort of hit him all. And this is a very bright guy. But I mean, it made a big difference in the way that they supported those people in prison.
Walk into the Apple store, or we have Google here in Pittsburgh, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, but I can walk into an environment like that and let's say, wow, there are a lot of people on the spectrum here. Because again, there are there are different ways of thinking, different ways of expressing, different ways of communication. I mean, it's different when you have autism.
Exactly. And so many people, I always, I mean, it's not, there's nothing funny about it, but when I think it was Zuckerberg was testifying somewhere and people were saying he was so rude. Well, he's brilliant, as many people on the spectrum are with Asperger's, absolutely brilliant, but the social skills just aren't there. And he appeared to be absolutely rude and disrespectful when they were asking questions that didn't make sense to him because he just assumed they would know the basics of what they were talking about, but they didn't. And he knew so much.
Yeah.
I, I I'm so fond of, I mean, she's getting up there in age as well as I am, Temple Grandin, who she's just so wonderful to listen to because she says, I had to ask people to teach me how to interact with someone because I know I was being rude, but I didn't mean to be rude. I mean, if someone says, how do you like this dress? Most people would say, if they didn't like it, they'd say, well, it's okay on you. How do you like it? But a person with Asperger's might say, it's terrible. I don't. They're so honest. They don't usually don't listen. I mean, they're so focused and they're too honest, maybe.
I like that honesty because to me, that honesty equals safety and predictability for me. But I know that people on the spectrum also need safety and predictability. We all do. I mean, that's why we
Yes.
have calendars, right? There is comfort in knowing what's happening around.
Right.
Hearing you talk, in my mind, I'm going, that's exactly why I'll never be out of a job because maybe they don't naturally get things, or maybe they do, but they don't have the communication skills to express it, right? And we just assume. That's one of the things that I learned so much about from you is it's not always safe to assume. You need to ask some questions.
Exactly. And I think it's also interesting that, the a few cases that I've mentioned before, but it's very specific to people with autism. I worked with two different gentlemen in different parts of the state, and both were incarcerated for child pornography. And because of the lack of social skills, people with autism often go online for social connections. and they go to adult pornography, which is legal, but it's an easy slip into child pornography from there. And both of these gentlemen were arrested. One fellow's door was broken down by the police, and they went in and took his computer, and but they both went to jail, but they had no idea that they were harming a child, because they said, I would never harm a child. I was just watching the video. I would never harm a child. But when I explained to them how a child got hurt, the more people would view, the more kids have to be recruited, and that's how they get hurt. They were appalled, and they were absolutely appalled, and just were so full of remorse and sadness that they'd indirectly harmed a child. But how would they know that unless we explain that? And we don't.
Well, and I think whether we're talking autism, which is a neurological disorder, or we're talking an intellectual disability, which is also
Yeah,
of the brain, so neurological, what I realize is it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. It matters that we tap into and understand how a person best receives information, how they best learn, and we teach them in that way. That's why I said there's no one size fits all curriculum for everyone on the stuff that we.
exactly. Exactly. One time, I
Yeah.
used to run a support group for LGBT young people. A young man, a new person, came to group with his staff. He lived in a group home. He had a mild intellectual disability and he was autistic. And he explained, his staff person went in the other room. He didn't stay in the room, but he explained to the other kids what autism was. And they had all kinds of questions and answers. And he continued in the group. I mean, it was wonderful for him and for everybody in the group as well. Think about that. People with intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities and autism. And in this case, this young person was a gay man. But how did the staff, how the support people, how do they deal with someone and support them if they're trying to figure out if they're gay or if they're trans and they don't have the words themselves? I mean, I know you've dealt with that with many people.
That's another component I think that we need to be teaching is looking at how a person learns. I mean, and again, we always are saying it goes back to positive approaches. And I think we've really lost a lot of the understanding and meaning of positive approaches because it is looking at the receptive, how a person learns, but it's also looking at, well, how does a person express themselves too? What is their expressive language? And we all have it. Doing this journey of spell to communicate and really starting to work with people on that, my eyes have opened up. I always presume the intellect of people. I think people are listening all the time. I think they're understanding.
Yeah.
I think we are the idiots if we don't believe that, whether a person has autism or they have dementia or they're on life support and in a coma, they're listening.
Wholeheartedly agree with that one.
And I'm testing that theory through S2C, and that's the using the spell boards, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that people who we're saying have moderate intellectual disabilities and autism are immediately able to spell words like Washington. And
Wow.
that just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, I saw you, I was with you when I saw a young man you were working with who started to sing.
Right.
And I was sitting with his mother, and she was just completely overwhelmed because you tapped into, again, you assumed he understood you, and he did.
Right. And that
Yeah,
led to him having a voice where we can go into places now and I can say to him, well, let the waitress know what you want. Right.
oh, that's awesome.
Just
Yeah,
start somewhere and you have to tap into the strengths and the ability, but how the person learns too.
exactly.
What matches, what works for them, and give them a choice in some of that too.
Yeah, and I think about the direct support professionals that care so much and struggle with this, really struggle. They don't have enough support. and knowledge themselves. And not that they can't have it, they just haven't received it around some of these issues. And I remember another case. This person actually, I don't know if he was on the spectrum when I think about it, but I believe he was. But he was stealing female clothing. And it got to the point where the staff was afraid that he was going to harm a female staff. I mean, I don't know how they made that jump.
Because
And
we
yeah,
overreact or we underreact.
exactly. And I just simply said to them, well, why don't you buy him some female underwear? Underwear is what he was stealing. And they were just kind of looked taken back. And I said, I think that's all he wants, because I had spoken to him. That's what he wanted. So they did, and that was it.
That was
But
it.
it was it. Just it was just a big problem, and he was unhappy, and they were unhappy, and
I think we're paralyzed by ourselves. I mean, and you say that too. I mean, we're afraid of what we don't know. And
exactly.
people are listening to this. I would say a majority of people are supporting adults in the system because that's primarily the work that we do.
Yes.
But I support children and teenagers also, not a lot, but I still do some work. And I tell people the key is to be honest, right? Don't
Yeah.
overshare. You let the person guide and be honest with them
Exactly.
based on
Yeah.
their age. So, I have this young man in my life. He's 13. I am answering his questions with his parents' permission, but I'm going to be honest about, because as you say, if we don't tackle the things like that, then they're not going to know and they're going to make mistakes. And I'm seeing him really flourish. He's maturing, because that's a huge compliment to say I'm being trusted with something big, something mature, like talking about masturbation.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, and that's a really tough age. I mean, the early teens, and then, the whole issue about masturbation, which is just, it really blows my mind that some of the things that have happened around that thing that's so normal, healthy, normal, and private. I mean, it's so basic to me. But people get, oh, well, you and I both worked with people who have been punished for masturbating and humiliated, and they're harming themselves. So they won't do it. They get an erection and they beat on their penis or something. And I mean, it's just awful. But we, the support people, have created that.
We, the poor people, have created that, and we're because of our baggage and hangups too. We're almost putting people in some dangerous situations. Uh,
Yeah.
we have addressed the religion. We've addressed that, where we
Yeah.
talk about that. But I have seen where that has really been damaging. I did a sexual consent screening this past week, and this older woman, it ended up, it really wasn't about the screening. It was about her saying she lost her partner. He passed away. She adored him, and she misses that love. She misses that belonging. And the issue is she's accepting a real not so nice guy. And
Um,
is kind of been on the fence about her willingness to do it despite this fear, or willing. She it's about so much more than
yes.
them having sex. I mean, it was about grief, and then it was about religion, because it came up where she said to me, she looked at me and said, I don't think, and she said his name, he's in heaven because he wasn't baptized or something like that. And I said, was he a good man? Yes. Do good men go to heaven? Yes. So where do you think he is? She went,
Aw,
I said, that's what I think too. And she just started to,
cry. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always, respect people who are religious. It can be a comfort and a support. But I had someone ask me once when I was working with LGBTQ kids, and speaking to a group, and she said, "What do you tell a child who is, identifying as gay, and their church doesn't approve of that, and it's a sin?" And I said, well, that's actually easy. I tell them to find a religious community that does support them. And there are many.
I mean,
It doesn't mean give up your faith. It means find a faith that respects you. It's a two-way street.
yeah. And that's
Yeah.
what I tell trans youth who are being kicked out of their parents' homes or being told
Oh, yeah.
they don't, convert or change or do something, then they're going to be disowned at the age of 12. That means sometimes you have to find your own family too. There's a lot of baggage that people have to carry and work through in order to get through. Because if
Yes.
we don't, and again, that's a part of the curriculum that we've developed. If we don't address things like trauma and approaches, how a person learns and how we give their information, they're going to fail.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I was this week, but I remember looking at one of the staff and we were talking about pornography. Oh, and I was saying, I don't think it's all wrong, right? I said, but here's my feeling. If you're not talking to him about sex, then he's going to go figure it out on his own. And we have the internet now. So I'm just going to ask you this question. Do you want the internet teaching your son about sex? She looked at me. She goes, I never really thought of it that way. That's half the problem too.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Our discomfort with talking. I mean, and that's what you and I often say. We talk about the things that no one wants to talk about. We have to, because people are getting hurt, they're hurting others, they're going to jail, their lives are limited, and that's not okay. It's not. Um,
But there's an element of paying attention though too, Sharon. And I've watched you for so long that you can pick up on, somebody's, you look at someone, you say, how was your day? And the person, it was okay.
yeah.
Right?
So tell me about it then.
You and I think there's somewhat of a difference, and this is what I'm seeing as really a trait that we need. Make ourselves vulnerable to say, I'm hearing the words, but I'm seeing something different. Are you okay?
Yeah.
And again, that's really positive approaches
Yeah.
because what I'm seeing is people are taking the word at face value, and I don't know if it's the lack of understanding or the lack of care or a combination of both. I'm not sure. But we got to somehow ignite the fire through people.
Yes. And when I think about, again, people with who are on the spectrum and the criminal justice system, I think about an interaction with the police. And I know several people, as do you, that it's terrifying. I mean, they're not going to just calmly take a deep breath and wait for the officer to come and talk to them. They're going to react, they're going to run, or they're
Which is why
so, I mean,
we're in training for police and first.
exactly, exactly. Years ago, we did a little bit of that in around the state, but again, that was years ago, and they stopped doing it. I'm sure somebody's still doing it, but I mean, it doesn't mean the police are bad guys. But what do they? You don't know what you don't know.
And this is sort of the epiphany that you and I have had on this journey, this podcasting journey together is, you can give advice, you can recommend things, but we see in our service system, at least in Pennsylvania, we come up with these really great things. And if there's an administration change or, the staff go here, if we're not producing a system that continues to foster the development of the growth of the area that we're focusing on, it gets
Yeah.
lost.
Yep, it does.
About every
Yeah,
years, it gets lost.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder about, someone who is, again, you're so good at working with people who are non-speaking people that maybe have autism and are struggling with some issue, whether it's their gender identity or that they, want a girlfriend or a boyfriend, whatever it might be. That many people just think, well, they don't speak, so they don't get it. So just, we'll go to the park once in a while and go to a movie or whatever, but they don't really know the person.
Yeah.
And, it would be so wonderful if the skill that you have could be shared with other people.
We're going to try through what we're doing. And we're
Yeah.
hoping going to filter out. But you know, that young man that you saw singing with me, I'll tell you
Yes.
where he's at right now. He is at, and you were here, I think, in July. So fast forward a few months, but he has expressed an interest in dating. He is going agreed that the next time he sees her, which is next week, he's going to ask her if they can go on a date. We have it all ready.
Oh my goodness.
And I've even thought ahead and we've planned out that I'll take them and try to help them facilitate the dating and then hand the reins to someone else. And you just have to get it started. You have to persist in doing the work and be raising people up to hand it off to them so that it
Yeah.
can use.
Yeah, and I think how wonderful I'm not going to say it would be. I'm going to say will be when the direct support people and the every level that we're looking at, all the different levels, have the same information, that they know how to support a person that's on the spectrum or that's non-speaking or whatever it might be. I mean, it's a lot, but there are a lot of people out there and we can do this together. We can.
Absolutely. I mean, I think about just the non-speaking community and S2C. I mean, there's a huge practitioner network just with S2C. And again, it's really about us merging the two worlds. It's about merging worlds and keeping them united
Yes.
to forge ahead. And that's really why I went through that course, was to not teach or train people in it. It's a tool that I have to work with the people that I work with.
Well, you do a heck of a job.
Yeah, thank you. Don't make it easy though, because you know what? They're the ones who want it. They want it. I mean, can you imagine not having a voice for 20, 30, 40 years?
No, I can't. I cannot. Yeah, it is pretty amazing. I mean, it's a whole other thing, but people who have been in comas and wake up and they'll tell you that they heard everything. They just couldn't move.
And a lot of the young men, and I say predominantly young men, we have young women in the system too. And it's not just offending issues, but the impulse control is a problem for a lot of people on the spectrum. So they could be feeling mad or upset about something and say, I'm going to come in here and blow you up. And they're at school
Yeah.
or somewhere else. And it's a huge ordeal and it's a federal crime. We need a lot more education, I think, in helping to understand what autism is, but help to mitigate people landing in the criminal justice system because they're not going to get the support that they need in the criminal justice system.
No. And when you think about, the things with people that I know personally who are on the spectrum, and just the reaction to light and sound and touch and all of that you don't have any choice once you're in the prison system. You're being bombarded. I mean, that's probably the worst punishment you could possibly do for someone.
Most of my job is trying to help people come out of the prison system, or the jail system, but they're in isolation because they can't handle it.
Exactly.
And so they're
Yeah.
deprived of human contact. Then you're depressed.
Yeah.
And it starts a really bad cycle. If we could just rewind a few years earlier or a decade or two earlier, and that's what you and I realized, we could have done something or at least try.
Yes, I know. Have to keep at it.